Alrighty, time to hand sew. So I have my needle threaded, and I just want to point out to you that I'm going to show you my two tails here. All right, so there's two pieces. They're not attached together. Remember, I have one tail. Sorry. There's my needle. I'm actually holding it so I don't pull the thread through. And when I slide down, this is my short tail. It's actually kind of long, which is good in the beginning. But as you sew, you're gonna have to pull this side and make it shorter. So this is my short tail, and there, and this is my long tail, which ends in a knot. I switched over my cutting mat to the light gray, thinking maybe it would be better for you guys to see. So there's my knot, here's my needle. I am not going to demonstrate every single hand sewing stitch that you have to do. The videos are pretty self-explanatory. The technique is still the same. It's just what I'm showing you is how it's measured. So remembering that each one is 1/8 of an inch, if I start in order with the even basting stitch, I'm going to be going 1/4 of an inch, which is, hang on, backtrack. I do need to say this. When you're sewing, okay, basting is a temporary stitch. It doesn't matter what side you start on. It doesn't matter where you finish. It's going to be taken out. When you get to your back stitch or your half back stitch or your running stitch, what's the last one? Your overcast. The overcast is a little weird, but you want to make sure that you start and finish your knots on the same side of the fabric, because that would be the inside of the garment, because that's a permanent stitch. So temporary, it doesn't matter if the knot's on this side, it's on that side, over here, it doesn't make a difference. When we get to back stitching, you'll see how I do it. So it's 1/4 of an inch depth, 1/4 of an inch stitch, 1/4 of an inch space. So I'm not gonna start at the first dot. I'm going to go in at the second dot. Now, if I came out at the next dot, that would be 1/8 of an inch. But if I come out at the second dot, that's 1/4 of an inch. And I'm sure this is in the other videos. A stitch is a full in and out motion. So I'm going to pull. And what I do as I pull, so that I don't pull my needle off the thread, because a lot of people do it, I grab my thread at the bottom. So it'll stop me from, because if you just keep pulling and pulling, you're gonna just pop your needle right off, and you're gonna be rethreading constantly. So I just grab here and I pull through, and there's my first stitch. And then I'm gonna repeat. So if the stitch is 1/4 of an inch, your stitch is the thing you see on the outside. I'm gonna go 1, 2, and I'm gonna go in, and then I'm gonna go 1, 2, and I'm gonna come out. Again, 1, 2. That's not straight. 1, 2, and out. 1, 2. Do your best not to do this. Go through here and pull out the back, because what you're going to be doing, this is how we do embroidery, but now you got to find your way back in to the next hole, which makes life harder. It's not necessary. So I'm skipping 2 and I'm coming out there. It really is so much easier just to go 1, 2, in and out in the same motion. Okay, I'm gonna finish this row. Don't want to leave it hanging. Two and 1, 2. Okay, it's very hard to see what I did because of the fact that I used a marker. Yours will be super tiny and not dark, and you won't have a line underneath it either. So what you're gonna see between the dots is actually your thread. So it's gonna look a lot better if you do it this way. Now, since this is a basting stitch and it will be coming out, all I would do, you could make a finishing knot if you wanted to, but I just leave a little bit of a tail and I cut it. And there is my even basting. And I really, really need you to do this. There's something right on my, I want you to identify even basting, right? So that when you actually do this, because you're gonna do this again, one per piece of fabric for your book, and you're not gonna write on the fabric. And then your next step will be over here, just write it. You could do that in advance too. This would be uneven basting. You can write it with any pen, any marker. I just happen to have this close by. And then you would do your uneven basting, which is going to be a little bit harder because you have to count more. So it's 3/4 of an inch and 1/4, 3/4 of an inch stitch, 1/4 of an inch space. So that means you will see, and you look at the other video, it'll be very clear. You will see the stitch 3/4 of an inch outside, and then you will go under and it'll be a space. It's 1/4 of an inch. And that's how you do with the tracing wheel technique.